Okay, so I'm going to do a poster demo. This is with the assumption that my students already have a decent understanding of poster design. So I'm not going to go too in depth about it. We've already talked about concepts. They already know software. The prereq is a software class, but I'll try to break down as much as I can while trying to be concise. So uh, I chose this World War II image because I thought that it would make sense, perhaps either subconsciously because I saw the U.S. bombs band name that I'm going to use for this band flyer. And I call it a flyer instead of a poster because it's 11 by 17 inches is what I'm going to do. Really, poster size is 24 by 36 or larger. There's a lot of debate about that. Um, I personally think that if it doesn't really matter. I'm not downplaying 11 by 17 images, but I'd say consider that more of a flyer, realistically. So I'm going to go to File, New is the first thing I'm going to do, or I can hit Command N as it notes, Control N for Windows to create a 11 by 17 document. I'm going to make sure that I have the correct notation, so I'll make sure it's inches 11 by 17. And I'm going to make my color mode CMYK color. Create. Next, I'm going to go back to this tab. I'm going to hit Command A, and that I know that this is selected because you grab what we call the marching ants around here. Then I'm going to hit Command C to copy, and all these key commands are in here under Edit, so copy. And then I'm going to cut, which would be Command A. Or actually, I'm going to paste into this document by hitting Command V. And as you can see, paste Command V. I'm hitting Command T. That key command lets me free transform. What that does, I can rotate and change the size and distort this image. I'm going to go over to the top corner when I see that diagonal, and this works on any of the corners, that diagonal arrow. I'm going to click and drag to bump up the size. Now, usually you don't want to do this for an image. You don't want to bump it up. Black and white images are a little bit more forgiving, but just so you know, this isn't typical. Now what I'm going to do is to make that edge a little bit less abrasive. There's a couple things I'm going to do. I'm going to play the contrast on the image, which is going to help the overall image feel a little bit better. But I'm also going to erase that edge with a soft edge on my brush. So this is the eraser tool right here. The eraser tool, under its options, which show up in the control panel, I can change the hardness. I always have a hardness of 0. I'm going to keep a round brush. Size I'm going to play around with my bracket keys. Those are both located next to the letter P. The left bracket decreases size, the right bracket increases the size. It's a really great key command because any tool that utilizes a brush style format, these can adjust the size of it. Now, I want a large size because the larger my brush size is, the smoother the transition is. And just to show you how that works, I'm going to click and drag through, and you see you kind of have like sort of a harsh line here. It's not very, transitions very well. But the bigger that I make my brush, if I use the eraser tool, you kind of end up with this really nice, soft, ethereal kind of vibe to it. And that's what I want on the top here. I use this analogy in class of it being like slamming on the brakes versus easing to a stop in a car or a bicycle. So the reason for that is that in the absolute center of my brush right now is 100% erased. And as I move from the center out to the exterior of the circular shape, it becomes progressively closer to 0% erase. And so by doing that, the overall transition for a larger distance is going to be a little bit softer and less abrupt than a shorter distance. So I have that. And now the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some of my type. And I plan to bring it in chunks. I'm going to bring in H2O first. And I'm going to make this type the largest type. I talk about this theory called the typographic landscape. And the typographic landscape is this idea that I have where, I'm going to hit Command T again. If the bigger, if you make, that is not the typeface I was looking for. I'm looking for League Gothic, regular. There we go. you have your larger information, you have a medium-sized information, and then you have tiny information. And the tiny information represents the background if it was a landscape. The medium-sized information reflects the middle ground, and then the largest information reflects the foreground. Now with type, it's different because type, unlike a lot of times with imagery, especially flat imagery like East Asian, Middle Eastern manuscripts, like older drawing styles, they'll have the foreground is on the bottom, and as you move up the page, it becomes further and further in the background. But with typography, since we read from left to right, top to bottom, we start with the largest information and move to the smallest often. That's not necessarily a rule that you have to restrict perfectly, but it is a useful rule and an easy way to make something quickly. It's not perfect. So this information, my supporting X, might be my mid-size stuff, and then my other information, it's going to be a little bit smaller than that. And then my address is going to be the smallest. And the idea is that it breaks things into chunks. Chunked information is a lot easier to digest for people than stuff that is all the same, presented at the same level of importance and the same level of interest. So with a good example of that is a phone number. So phone numbers are broken down into 3 chunks. If it was one string of numbers, that would be a lot harder to digest. And posters need to be digested in a very short amount of time. So you have to make sure that the most important thing, which might be the headlining act, even though all these bands were relatively well known at the time, the headlining act is the big thing. Supporting acts is the next thing you might think about. And then you might consider, after you've seen, oh, H2O is playing, you're going to wonder when and how much does it cost and where it is finally. Like that's, those are the kind of like the general mental process that somebody has when they're looking at a musical flyer. So again, this would be my foreground, middle ground, and background, and it creates this level of depth to the poster that doesn't exist if you don't have those 3 distinct sizes. Sometimes that's not possible. You might have 2 distinct sizes. You might have 1 because you only have 1 word to work with. But generally, I find that thinking about it philosophically in this manner, from top to bottom, foreground to background, is a really useful tool for poster layout, as well as other principles. So one of the principles that I was taught in school by my professor, Rob Carter, is the idea of the typographic grid. The typographic grid is not like a literal grid, like it's this abrasive, grid of squares like graph paper. It's more so about the relationship between objects. So I might say like this helmet is one of the closest things to the word H2O. So maybe I line up H2O so that it is lined up with the helmet, and that's what we call creates a level of visual harmony versus visual dissonance. Another thing I'm going to do with H2O to make it more interesting, and these details are things that you should be doing on a regular basis because it really makes a poster from this level of just like existing to a more refined kind of level. I'm going to hit Command T to get my character panel, and I'm going to do what we call subscript. That shrinks down some of the type so that it's, which is perfect for H2O. And then I'm going to use my baseline shift, which shifts at that little line under the H and the O. That's the baseline. This allows me to increase the height of my number 2, so it's kind of like in the middle there. I'm going to also tighten up the spacing between the H and the 2 and the H and the O. Okay, and move it back to that line. Now for US bombs, this text, I'm going to maybe have it hanging off of the number 2. And I'm going to, because you see how these gaps are pretty large, I'm going to go back to my type tool and I'm going to change what we call the leading, or the spacing between lines of type. Now, especially with all caps type, you don't want the spacing to be auto. It oftentimes looks awkward. I also am going to play around a little bit with this type sizing. I might make US bombs a little bit bigger than the rest of the text, and then I might make Kid Dynamite a little bit smaller than the rest of the text. And then if I do so, I'm going to, of course, have to readjust the leading and how that looks. Another thing that I might do to create rhythm, a lot of times like flowing really is useful. I'm going to increase the spacing of agnostic front, so maybe that the A is sort of in the middle of USN bombs. And this feels nice in that it also echoes the firearm. I also might shrink all this because I'm seeing that there's a nice relationship between perhaps that pocket and the rest of that type. So like right here, to kind of help it feel a little bit better. Now for the 10-7 p.m. and March 17th, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it all in one line of type. I think that's going to be a better solution. And I'm going to do one thing that I really like to use is this double / option to separate the type. A lot of people do different techniques. Sometimes they use a vertical slash, sometimes they use a period as a way to mess with this. And with these slashes, to make them work better, I'm again going to decrease using my kerning option, which is right here, decrease the spacing between those two so that they feel a little bit better. Not so far spaced. I'm going to copy that so I don't have to reinvent the wheel and just, oops, I didn't copy both. Copy those and paste them between March and 7 p.m. so again I don't have to do all those adjustments. Zoom in. So this type I'm going to place right here by the rifle. And what's nice is that the $ almost echoes the firearms sight, which is kind of nice. I'm going to highlight the $, and I could do superscript, which pulls things up, which again, making these stylistic choices. I don't particularly like the $ design for League Gothic, which you can change. Also, again, this might be a good opportunity to talk about how, to reiterate, there's quite a few websites that I shared with my students. There is, and I just added 0.25 because it wasn't quite accurate. You might use, and again, like thinking about how this is aligned, maybe the 1 is where I align that top of that piece. The League of Movable Type is a great resource. I might also try Google Fonts is a great resource to download commercial use typefaces. And then what's it called? Misprinted Type. You can get some really nice grunge typefaces for free there and for cost. And also a Blambot, which he has some free stuff for indie and smaller project kind of things. And then if you're doing it more commercially on larger institutional projects, he requests that you license it, which isn't unreasonable. But they're not that expensive to begin with, and it's a comic type foundry, but there's a lot of design typefaces that are really well done there as well. So definitely do that. Not Defont. A lot of my students go to defont.com. There's a lot of poorly designed typefaces, and a lot of those typefaces you need to check because they do specify whether or not it's for commercial use or for personal use, and you need to make sure that you're not going to get sued in the future if you use it commercially. So I just made my PM smaller. The reason I made that is because I want to use small caps. Small caps is right here with the type tool. That's how I access it. What that does is it makes my capital letters the height of lowercase letters, but capitals. Now, ideally, you would have a small caps variant of the typeface, but there isn't. So for League Gothic, so I'm just going to use small caps. And I'm going to tighten up the space between the P and the 7 as well, again, using my kerning. With 17th, again, another great opportunity to use superscript. And again, all these different stylistic choices, and you see how it's not aligned quite, so I'm going to move it down a little bit. It might be like 0.25 might work. Negative, not positive. It's not enough, so maybe negative 0.5. 0.75. Not quite still. 0.8 maybe. And the reason I'm doing that again is to create this visual harmony versus visual dissonance for something. It just needs to be 1. Yeah, perfect. All right, so in visual dissonance, what it means is like when things aren't congruent. It's like bands being slightly offbeat with one another, the audience is going to know something's wrong. Maybe they don't know exactly what is wrong, but they'll know something is wrong. And then I'm going to move this. I might move this. I'm going to look at this letter T, or maybe even the letter F, to align my line of the pricing. And you could do what we call hanging information with things like this, or quotation marks is sometimes nice. Or you can also just have it aligned to the dollar sign. I might do the hanging thing for now. And then gallery 5, I might hang off of the M. And I'm going to go ahead and, because this is taking up a bit of room, to do some shorthand, I'm going to make this RVA instead, and people in Richmond will know what we're talking about. I'm going to also, again, go back to my leading and tighten that up so that and I'm using the arrow keys to increase and decrease the size right now. Make it a little bit less abrasive. And I'm going to shrink down that address just a little bit to accommodate this pocket. I think I might actually move all my type over too a little bit. And then that'll allow my gallery 5 to kind of fit nicely in this little pocket with the vegetation. Actually, this might work really well. Actually, maybe I'll keep it back where it was. This is kind of like what a lot of the type design is, just moving things back and forth. But you know, it's almost like this twig is holding that letter, or that number, O, 0. So that's kind of nice, and that's why I decided to move it back. All right, so we have these, you know, this stuff has like a pretty decent flow. I might even move US bombs a little bit down. And already it has a pretty decent flow for type, but we're going to play around with some color elements and other things to make it feel a little bit more engaging, a little bit more fun. I might even increase this type size just a little bit to make it feel a little bit nice. Maybe set it up so that my letter E fits with the, yeah, that feels a little bit better. And again, foreground, middle ground, background. Now the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to start playing around with color, which is going to help, you know, this project be a little bit stronger overall. To do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Army people, and I'm going to go to Select Color Range. And what Color Range does, it allows me to sample a range of color. Now you see how it's sampling the text right now? I don't want it to sample the text, I just want to access the photograph. So I'm going to hit Cancel, and I'm going to have to turn off my type. So I'm going to click on the H2O and drag my mouse up while holding the mouse button down. That turns off all the eyeballs. It's a cool trick that I learned from a student. Select Color Range. And actually, let me go over this real quick. So color range, just to, you know, I've gone over this already for my class, but I'm posting this online. So let's, under color range, I am allowed to adjust the fuzziness. That deals with how much is selected. I'm going to jack it all the way up. The plus adds to the selection. The eyedropper minus subtracts from the selection. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to create a new layer. And when I go to Edit Fill, I'm going to fill in a color. So I can change foreground color, background color. Right now, foreground is black. My background color is white, that white square. I'm going to go to regular color, and that lets me pick out one. I'm going to do this teal. And that could be like a fun way, you know, if I turn this off, it can be a fun way to approach this. So I have this like neat kind of teal color. Turn the type back on, and I might want my type to relate to that by sampling the color. Now, this is a pretty standard tool. I included on your links in the description of this video, but also on Blackboard for my students. And what it does, it erodes one barrier of dissonance. So highlighting the two with the color, immediately, almost instantaneously, we now have this relationship between the type and the image. I might also do that for some other areas, just to kind of create that relationship. And I'm doing front because I feel like it'll create this nice triangular shape. Building triangles in composition is a pretty like typical thing. It helps move the eye through the composition in an interesting or an engaging manner. And I'm going to make all of this type, this whole line of type, that teal as well. So now I have this nice kind of vibe going that's creating some dynamic qualities, some rhythm, all these things that you want to see in a poster. And it looks like actually I just caught looks like my G and my M might not be quite. It might just be the angle. Yeah, they're a little bit off. Now, typically, you do want a G to hang over a little bit, but Gothic is not as curved as most letter, and this is actually like an optical illusion for typography. I'll go here just to show you. See how the O's hang below the baseline? Don't we can't tell that they're slightly bigger because they look like they're lined up, but when you look on the baseline, you can tell that they're slightly below, and that's something for type design. But because these are such straight lines on the edges of the type to make it that tall kind of way, it looked a little bit off. There's a little bit of dissonance, and eventually your eye will get trained to recognize those kinds of things. I can also add a background color. I'm going to use the paint bucket tool without all layers checked, so it only selects the background layer. And I might pick a color like, I may pick an off-white, or maybe I pick like sort of like an olive drab color. Something, there's a lot of ways to play around with it. I always think pink and green work pretty well, but, and that's pretty 80s punk, but maybe it's not appropriate for this. I'm not sure. That kind of made the image a little bit hard to see. There's different ways I can play around with the image too and how it engages the background under these drop-down menu, under layers. Each one of these changes the way that the image engages the background, and I actually kind of like the way that white kind of negative screen look does, but maybe I don't want, yeah, maybe that works. And but if I do that, my background's going to, of course, need to be darker. So let's go back to my background, and I'm going to go, again, you can do this under the layer options, and it creates a layer with this change. I like doing it this way personally, and I'm going to go U saturation. U in saturation allows me to change the color properties of an image. I play around with this a lot. I probably want something a little bit darker so my type can show up. And maybe I want kind of just playing around and finding something that works well. And maybe like this nice kind of olive color, like looks pretty close to like sort of a military kind of style thing. And you see how this white is starting to not look white. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn everything off again, bring my image back up, and you can see how I erased it. I'm going to go select color range again to actually create that white, since it's interacting with the olive color a little bit differently. Okay. Again, I'm going to create a new layer by hitting this little new icon, and I'm going to actually fill it in with the foreground color, which is that white, or I could just say fill in white. There is a white option. I'll just do that. And then turn off my image and bring this stuff back up. And you see that makes it a little bit better. I'm going to potentially make a couple of things white here too to add yet another color to my information. So maybe the O and the H now become white for H2O. Maybe the agnostic and agnostic front becomes white. Perhaps the gallery 5 information, the location information, becomes white. I'm just trying to build this weaving and this engagement between different visual elements. The green now, the teal on this type is now becoming not so easily seen. So I'm going to go ahead and change these to make them darker. This eyedropper lets me sample the exact color that I used previously. And it's starting to feel pretty okay. Like I have this good relationship, good type, layout's feeling okay. The next step that I'm going to play around with that I utilize often is sampling textures from the image and applying them to the type. Some people don't like this because it's pretty grungy. Like if I was going to do something really clean, I wouldn't. But I personally think that it really works well in eroding barriers between the type and the image. So to do that, I'm actually going to go to my image and go use my magic wand tool to select content. Oops, and I'm going to uncheck contiguous. What unchecking contiguous and unchecking sample all layers does, sample all layers, of course, it creates a sample with a magic wand tool, and it is magical. When I click on something, it tries to find similar styles of information and sample that. If I have contiguous checked, it only samples stuff that's adjacent to one another. So without it checked, it samples every instance of that color. So I'm going to go to I don't really like the way it's engaged. Oh, I know why. So my tolerance deals with how much is considered part of the selection. 32, 40 is a really good range. So now I can potentially sample some extra stuff. If I go to my marquee tool, it allows me to move a selection. And I might go to select inverse to invert the selection just so that it's maybe not as abrasive. And then over US bombs is where I'm going to apply the mask. So to apply a mask with a selection, once you have a selection specified, and I had to do that on layer 3, I'm going to use bomb layer, and I'm going to click this little square with a circle in it. That's what we call a layer mask. And what a layer mask does is it erases part of the content. I erase too much, so I'm going to try inverting my mask's colors. What the mask does, the way it works, is anything that is anything that's sort of black erases the content, and anything that's white brings it back. So I can actually use my paintbrush to do this. I can paint black to erase part of the words, and then I can use white to bring it back. It's nice because it gives you the option of getting rid of content. Now I don't think that this sample of the texture is so good. I'm going to maybe try, I'm going to delete the mask, and I can do it by, I just dragged the mask onto this trash can, and I want to delete it. I don't want to apply it. And I'm going to maybe turn off the white option and bring up my black and white and see if sampling with my magic wand tool that way, yeah, I get a much better selection already. So I'm going to use that, again going to my marquee tool, and I'm going to bring this stuff up over here. And then click on that and make my mask. Now that feels a lot better, but it's a little bit too intense. So there's a few ways to navigate this. The first thing I'm going to try is, if I see that little link there, if I uncheck that link, it allows me to actually move the mask using my move tool independently of the type. And I can maybe see if I can find something that's not as abrasive. I cannot. So the other option that I can do is with a mask under properties, there's a way to play around with this select and mask option. And what that does, I want to see the mask. It allows me to manipulate some of the options. So if I shift edge, it can change, how how much is potentially used. I can use contrast to play around with this. I can use smooth. There's a lot of things to kind of play around with. Yeah, this doesn't seem to be working either. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this mask again. Except this time with my magic wand tool, I'm actually going to reduce my tolerance. Maybe not 3, maybe like 18. Maybe I can select a little bit less information. Get in the black and white image. Got to uncheck contiguous. And maybe that'll help it be a little bit less intense. Yeah, that's much better. All right, so I'm going to undo that link, and then I'm going to use my move tool to kind of play around with what gets utilized. And then the other thing that's kind of cool about this is on the mask, I can paint white, and I can bring in some of my letters that maybe I'm not seeing enough of them, so that'll help. I can still keep some of the texture, but I can get rid of some of the stuff that is being too much. The other cool thing about it is I can transfer a mask from one layer to another. The problem with this is that when I do so, it actually disappears from the current layer I have. And there might be a better way to do this, but this is the hack that I use. I'm going to click and drag my mask over to my layer, and the new layer icon next to the trash can, and when my mouse is over that, I can tell because my hand's over it, it creates this new layer and allows me to then transfer that mask over here. And it doesn't matter because I'm just going to go ahead and delete my second US bombs copy, and now I have a mask on my March information. And again, like it's it's a little bit too much. I'm gonna just just enough to kind of imply it, and then I'm gonna use again paint in some of the information that I might be losing. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. Copy it, drag it over to maybe not the Gallery 5 text, but maybe the H2O text. And that actually works fine. I'm just going to leave that as is. And then, again, delete that content. And then let me turn this one off so you can see how Gallery 5 is looking. I might leave that one alone because it's so small. Maybe the texture is a little bit too much. Or maybe I'll go ahead and apply it, but I'll just have like the edge of one character, just so that Gallery 5 doesn't feel left out, metaphorically. So if that's too much, so just like a little piece maybe is getting cut out of it. Or maybe even maybe even the bottom of the type. Yeah, that feels pretty good. All right, and you can also group these things. So if I want all my type in one folder to make it a little bit easier to navigate my document, I can select them all. I click on the top one, hold shift, click on the bottom one, and click the folder option. Now they're all in one folder. So type, I'm going to call it type just so I know what it's called. And I could apply a mask to this folder and play around with that. So this is feeling pretty good so far. I'm going to go ahead and play around with a couple other things. So another thing that I oftentimes do that can be really useful is you might create formal elements. So it could be like vector graphics, it could be something else. I'm going to use these double brackets to do my elements. So I'm going to create the double brackets, and I'm going to hit Command T and really bump this up in size, and these can be like a fun kind of formal element to play around with. So again, using the typographic grid so that this type feels good. And these formal elements, just these like kind of graphic options, can create some more rhythm and some more compelling visual interests. And I'm just going to copy this in a couple locations. Sometimes, and I might apply that concept of the typographic grid to this as well, where you have a foreground, middle ground, and background for even your formal elements to create, again, like an interesting visual hierarchy. And again, I'm lining this up with different things. Like, so here I'm lining it up with his belt buckle. You might also do a variant. Oops, I think I pulled it too far. A variant where it is actually the color of the background. So now I have, let's make sure all of it's selected. And then I bump that up, and you have like something where you're cutting into the image with some of these formal elements, and it creates this like weaving kind of effect that allows for both the type and the image to be engaged with one another more. Something on top, something behind. When you move type behind and in front of things, it can create like these nice formal relationships. And again, I'm still making sure all my type and my image information is lined up. And for the O, because I know that the O needs to be slightly above the baseline, I'm going to actually make this slightly below that area. And it's starting to kind of feel like a pretty good, or I could just use the H as an option. as a way to know what I'm doing. Those pink lines that are shown us are what we call smart guides. And again, creating some nice triangular spaces with the type. And another thing, if you want to be super punk about it, that you can utilize is you, of course, can apply a texture. And I'm going to everything, to the entire poster. Or you can utilize, potentially, another tool that I utilize is, that I often play around with, is texture brushes. But let's go ahead and select everything. Another trick that I've mentioned in the past is to rotate everything if an image isn't particularly engaging. One thing that's pretty easy to do is if you just tilt it at a slight angle, it almost instantaneously kind of like adds some compelling visual interest. So there we go. And you see how like almost instantly this becomes a little bit more of an interesting poster. I might need to bring this a little bit over so it's not so what we call my Professor Bende used to always call a claustrophobic. This item feels claustrophobic, is what he might say. And I'm kind of actually guessing with the alignment, doing it kind of by eye. Okay, so what you might do is you might go on to a Google image search, and you might find something like, I'm going to look up concrete texture. And concrete texture, with concrete texture, I'm going to find something that is using my tools in the image search. I'm going to want something large, and under usage rights, I'm going to want something that is labeled for reuse with modification, meaning I can use it commercially. Flickr is always a good resource because they tend to have these Creative Commons licenses. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this one, go to my download, the original, and it's downloading, and then I'm just going to drag this over to my Photoshop icon. And so now I have this texture. Before I drop it in, I'm going to go to Image, Mode, Grayscale, and then I'm going to bump up the contrast of the image so that the more intense it is, the more useful this texture ends up becoming. I'm going to hit Command A to select it, and then I'm going to drop it into my image. Again, black and white imagery is a little bit more forgiving. And one of the ways that I play around with this is I can, under the drop-down menu here, I have my texture over top of everything, so I'm going to make sure it's above my type. It wants me to put it in the folder. So above my type, and I'm going to play around. Multiply is usually my go-to. You see like that texture is really nice. But you might play around with some others and just see like kind of like, how does this like, affect the overall image? And there's different things that can happen, that are sometimes fun. Like divide, I think this is probably one of the best options. And then I might, what I might do is I might reduce the opacity a little bit, on this texture, just so it's not as intense. And that's pretty good. Like it's a pretty okay flyer. I might play around with it more. The type might be played around with a little bit more, but at least it gives you like a general idea of what some of the thoughts that are going through my head, some theories that I utilize with my professional practice, like for example, like this letter. I'm looking now and I see this letter K is a little bit off, but gives you a general idea. Make sure you make things really big, really small. Throw a texture on something, erase something, just cut something in half. All these different ways you play around with type can make it really engaging. And what's nice about digital formats is that there isn't a whole lot of stress that you have to have about whether or not something gets broken because we're not doing oil painting. We don't have to go. It's much easier to go back and fix any aspect of your design. So don't be scared. Fail frequently. Make a lot of mistakes, and hopefully that'll help you get to a solution that's really strong. All right, good luck.